For many years, we were left to wonder if there were any hospitals on Great Bear Island.
Is there anywhere to get medical help?
What? You mean like a hospital? Out here? Nah, nothing like that.
What about other emergency services, like firefighters or police? With the state of the island following decades of economic turmoil, which happened before the collapse, it would not be a surprise if the answer to these questions was no. What would happen if there was a serious emergency on Great Bear Island, such as the big one? No, not you, Big Eddie. Get back in your pond. I'm talking about a massive earthquake. Or what about a plane crash, a forest fire, or worse? What would happen to those asking for help? Despite everything, the island had a network of civilian emergency responders in case of such an event. Let's dive into what we know about the emergency services on Great Bear Island, past and present. To start, I want to go over all the old lore regarding this topic. I say old lore because there is new lore relevant to emergency services on Great Bear Island. First, we have the buffer memories of the broken railroad, which features a set of notes by an emergency medic after they helped save a railroad worker. I won't be reading them here, but there is already a whole video dedicated to them. Considering the buffer memories are found in the Briar House maintenance yard, it is likely that these emergency medics were contracted by the company to assist whenever there was a medical emergency. Considering what Jeremiah tells us about hospitals and the lack of them in the area, this is likely a service that Briar House is paying for in the event of an emergency. So at the very least, there certainly was some kind of emergency service out there, but it was likely very costly. If you want to know more about the buffer memories and lore of the Broken Railroad region, check out this video, which will be linked in the description. I also want to mention the notes from the Bleak Inlet and buffer memories of the Forlorn Muskeg, which tell the story of an islander that was hired to repair the radio towers in the area. Unfortunately, we don't know what ended up happening to them, but they left behind various distressing notes. He would end up calling for an extraction due to the threat of timberwolves in the area. Like I said, we don't know if they ever got the help they needed, but it seemed like there was some kind of rescue service available somewhere on the island. I will also link the memories of the Muskeg and Inlet video in the description. Next, I'm going to commit a mortal lore sin. I'm going to look at a Predux lore note. I know, I've said it many times before that I don't consider Predux only lore to be canon. For anyone that doesn't know what Predux and Redux are, these terms refer to the original and remade versions of Wintermute episodes 1 and 2 respectively. Most lore from Predux Wintermute was included in the Redux version, but there are some notes and dialogue that didn't make the transition. There is something relevant from Predux episode 1 that I do want to look at here. From Emergency Kit Note. This emergency kit is distributed free of charge by the Great Bear Earthquake Memorial Society. Our nonprofit work helps guarantee full preparedness for any future emergencies on Great Bear Island. Our motto, we remember. This note makes mention of the Great Bear Earthquake Memorial Society and is the only place in the lore that mentions it. The note is found alongside an emergency kit that is found in Martin Barker's house at Paradise Meadows. I believe it can be assumed that these kits were distributed to the remaining islanders for emergencies, but we don't see them elsewhere across the game. Of course, with the removal of the note and the kit in the Wintermute Redux, it is hard to tell if they were actually widely distributed. Considering it is not a part of Redux, I can't say for sure if the GBEMS still exists in the lore, but its existence would work with it. Considering how often we find emergency stims, MREs, and distress pistol kits, there certainly was some effort to distribute emergency supplies across the island at some point. Finally, let's look all the way back to the release of the Signal Void Tale and the introduction to the transmitter system. For this note, I will only read the part that is relevant to this video. Field 31 Search and Rescue Upgrades. Hey crew. As you know, we've been asked to provide SAR coverage for the rest of Great Bear. We're tapping into the existing radio transmitter system, but it's pretty old. The transmitter towers are scattered all over the lower island, including one we jury-rigged right here at the Field 31 tower. The transmitter boxes are a bit prone to breaking down, but when powered and in good working order, each tower can cover a decent range, well beyond the region it's located in. Without these transmitters working, we'll have a hell of a time locating any transponder signals from crashed planes or whatever, so we need to stay on top of this. Signed, Captain Reddick, 14th Wing, SAR. If you recall from Wintermute episode 2, Jeremiah provided some backstory for the radio towers that are all over Great Bear Island. They are used for radio communication, and the towers themselves act as a booster that helps the signal get to the next tower. This allowed us to use the radios in episodes 2 and 3. Believe it or not, these radio towers are the reason we can communicate with the trader, Sutherland, in survival mode. Since we are communicating directly, we are using the actual radio communication network of the island. What we see at Field 31 and other locations on the island are transmitter towers that serve a different purpose. The SAR in the Field 31 memo stands for Search and Rescue. The transmitter system was built to triangulate emergency signals, such as those from crashed aircraft. This is separate from the main radio towers, but is working on the same communication network. What is strange though is that the bunkers from the tails only jammed the transmitters and not the radio towers. How and why the bunkers were jamming the transmitters is still a mystery. Considering 4 of the 6 transmitters were jammed for who knows how many decades, and all 6 were in desperate need of repairs, I think it's safe to assume that the search and rescue efforts on Great Bear Island might have ended some time ago. This might explain some of the various aircraft crash sites with bodies, but I personally believe most of them are there because of the first flare. After going over all of the different mentions of emergency services across the lore, we can get to the final and most recent addition to the lore regarding this topic. It is the addition of the new radios, which are used to communicate with the trader, and this note that inspired this video. From a page from an old newsletter. Dear Civilian Corps members, as discussed at our last meeting, we're pleased with how many volunteers have stepped up to host a radio for our new emergency network plan. As of tomorrow, we'll have civilian broadcast capability from nearly every community on Great Bear. We're confident this will give us good coverage for enabling two-way emergency transmission from the coast all the way to the far territory. If you are near one of these locations and would like to volunteer for a shift monitoring the radios, please see the Corps officer in your locale about signing up. With tremors increasing, building a durable radio network could make all the difference when the big one hits. With gratitude, Jen Whitney, Executive Officer. With the flavor text of this note reading, Great Bear Emergency Civilian Corps, we have a new organization appear for the first time in the lore. The GBECC sounds like it could be a replacement for the Great Bear Earthquake Memorial Society, which was only mentioned in Predux Wintermute. Essentially, this is a civilian-run network of radios and personnel that would communicate with others on the network whenever there was an emergency. As I mentioned before, this all runs on the radio communication network, not the transmitters. Considering the transmitters were for signal triangulation, not radio communication, this explains why we don't need the transmitters to use the radios. As with most of the notes in this game, it is hard to tell if this is pre or post-collapse. With the state of the island, I would have guessed that this was a post-collapse occurrence, but then I looked at the list of radio locations. There is one in Black Rock, Bleak Inlet, Broken Railroad, Coastal Highway, Forsaken Airfield, Mountain Town, Mystery Lake, Pleasant Valley, Transfer Pass, and the Zone of Contamination. My understanding is that the Zone of Contamination has been long abandoned since the time of Rudiger's project. This would have been in the early 1980s, meaning this would be a rather old system. Maybe some of these radios existed before the greater network was made, but the Zone of Contamination radio kinda breaks the lore if these are from post-collapse times. No one would have been around. Also, I believe that places like Forsaken Airfield, Transfer Pass, and the cannery at Bleak Inlet would have been closed before or by the time of the collapse. One explanation would be that the radios are much older, to a time when the far territory was filled with people and industry. The other explanation would be that these radio locations were selected for gameplay reasons, meaning they are there because game. The note does mention that they were placed at communities, but I wouldn't say all of these locations with radios fit the description. I should mention that there is a confirmed community in the far territory thanks to a recipe card offered by the trader. Of all the things in the game, I wouldn't expect a recipe card to drop such interesting lore. Maybe the recipe cards deserve their own video. To end things for this video, I do want to bring up Ash Canyon and the obvious forest fire that took place there. We know there were abandoned forest watchtowers all over the island, and there was one for sure actively working in Mystery Lake at the time of the first flare, but did anyone do anything about this fire? Probably not, which is why the damage is so extensive. Although the Ash Canyon forest fire might be more than what it appears to be. I will continue to discuss Ash Canyon and this forest fire in a future video. Also, what about the plane crash in Timberwolf Mountain? There are buffer memories and a singular note in the region, but I have yet to explore them to see if they offer an explanation. There's a bit of mystery surrounding this plane crash, more than the smaller ones all over the island. The buffer memories of Timberwolf Mountain will also get their own video in the future. I believe that concludes this video. This is a very interesting topic that does raise a few questions. If the civilians on Great Bear Island had to form their own emergency service network, what is going on with the government? Is there even a form of government on Great Bear Island? My guess, by how grim things were getting by the time of the collapse, the answer might be no. That also makes me wonder how bad things were on the mainland during the time of the collapse. This is a topic I hope we can explore when Black Frost releases. I would love to learn about the remnants of the military, government, and emergency services on the mainland following the first flare. For now, you should catch up on any videos you might have missed from the Tall Tales series, which is complete for the time being. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like for the algorithm so I can keep making them.